Hey guys, today I have something for you a little bit different because I'm out on Maui for something rather uncar related, and I managed to get my hands on a brand new Dodge Durango, essentially base trim from Hertz. Let's take a look and let's see why you might really want to consider a Durango over something like a RAV4 or the next step up in a mid-size crossover, because this is a pretty big vehicle, and in base format it's actually a two-row SUV. And that's probably the biggest thing that that surprised me, because I should have known this. I actually forgot that this existed, a Durango without a third row seat. And there is a big advantage. If I pull up this little lid, which come off, you can see we have a big underfloor storage area right there that is right where the third row goes. And that's one of the big advantages of getting a third row or a three-row vehicle that has a three-row delete option. You get a lot of that space back. So that is in addition to all of the space that we have under that little floor right there. You'll find this in the regular Durango. And then of course we have the full-size spare tire or compact spare tire optionally available under the vehicle. This one just has the temporary spare under there. 43 cubic feet of storage space plus the approximately extra 10 cubic feet of storage space under the floor puts this well ahead of options like the Honda Passport, definitely ahead of options like a RAV4 or CRV. And I think the Durango looks relatively good. Let me know what you think of the styling as we walk around. I think it's aged pretty well. It comes across as maybe a little bit bland, maybe a little bit boring, I guess you could say, but I think that its age has escaped ugly. Now up front, of course, we have the more recent headlight design. This one has the sort of chrome frowny face going on there on the front. I think it definitely looks best in the SRT varieties with the more angry grille and the hood louvers, etc. It really fills out the look. But the base version, I think it actually is fairly handsome. Now, of course, in base format under the hood, we have the base 3.6 liter V6 engine producing around 290 horsepower, around 260 pound-feet of torque. It's mated to the same 8-speed automatic transmission that you'll find in the rest of the Durango lineup. And this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, and that does have some pros and cons. Obviously, handling is going to be a little bit better, but you can see we have a pretty pronounced drivetrain hump right there in the middle, and that's to accommodate that ZF 8-speed automatic transmission. And the rear seat passengers also get a reasonable hump right back there as well. Now, we do have some nice touches even in this trim, like rear seat air vents, and then you can select between floor and face right there. And we also have separate controls up here for this third climate control zone. That's perhaps one advantage of getting a three-row vehicle with the delete option, is that we still have things like this for the third row. And if you do like carrying dogs or other pets with you, you should know that we not only have the ceiling vents here for the second row passengers and the ones in the center console, we also have vents back here in the cargo area effectively, because, you know, that's where the third row would go. Now, in the third row delete option, no seat belts obviously going on back there. This one also doesn't have any sort of cargo cover with it, but we get some large storage bins on either side rather than the armrests that you'd normally find. I am actually surprised that Dodge changed the rear end as much as they did rather than simply putting a flat floor back there. Now, since this is the two-row model, we of course have a three-person second row bench, decently sized cup holder right there, and you can see that these seats are fairly wide. On the inside, the Durango is certainly a blend of old and new. When we take a look at the door panels, these are basically the same door panels that we've seen in the Durango for quite some time. And the general seat design should be pretty familiar as well. I think it's a relatively attractive design. Of course, the fabric choice is more of a personal preference. You can get leather in the upper end trims, but we do have nice touches like four-way ratchet style headrests, height adjustable shoulder belts. The driver's seat in this model has four-way adjustable lumbar support and a power seat, but of course the passenger is completely manual. The side bolstering is somewhat aggressive, but the seat bottom cushion bolstering is definitely suitable for larger folks. You can see that we have blend of soft and hard touch plastics down there around the door and on the dashboard. One surprising touch in this interior is that we have an actual stitched element right here in the middle. This is sort of a faux wood trim, I guess you could say. It doesn't really go with much of the rest of the interior trim other than that one little stripe over there on the doors. The upper section of the dash is just a regular soft touch injection molded section with some sort of odd lines in there to, I guess, give it some extra visual interest. Harder plastics are found down at the bottom of the dash, like around that glove box right there. Moving up to the middle of the dashboard, not every model gets the larger, just over 10-inch infotainment screen. You will find that in the upper level versions, not only is the screen bigger, it actually runs a different version of Uconnect. It's the more recent version. So this version of Uconnect is the older 4 series of Uconnect, but it still has Sirius XM, it still has some app integration. You can still repeat some of the climate controls over here on the screen. Then below that, we have some physical climate controls. So if you prefer to change your temperature up and down, heated seats, heated steering wheel, things like that, those are still there. We have 4 USB ports here, 2 USB-Cs and 2 regular USBs, but the total USB port does drop when you take a look at the base trim. So no big bank of USB ports on the back of the center console for the rear passengers. There's lots of storage area here, big cup holders. Those are capable of storing large takeout drinks. Pretty large center console with a reasonable amount of storage space right there. And then over on the driver's side, I was surprised that this model has leather-wrapped steering wheel. It's kind of a nice touch. No adaptive cruise control though. No paddles on the back of the steering wheel either. But we do have the partial LCD instrument cluster that we've seen for a while available in the Dodge, and it's even in this relatively low trim here. You can see it gives you readouts like your trip computer, active safety status readouts, etc. But this vehicle doesn't have that many active safety systems on it. So again, no adaptive cruise control, no lane centering, no parking sensors. Those would be buttons that you'd find down here. When it comes to driving dynamics, it's important to remember that the Durango is pretty heavy. The lightest model is going to be 4,750 pounds. Add all-wheel drive, you're up to 4,884 pounds. And the heaviest 3.6-liter V6 model is going to be 5,063 pounds. That is significantly higher than most of the competition. So even though this has a near-perfect 50-50 weight balance and its rear-wheel drive, it's not necessarily going to be as much fun as some of the lighter competition, especially since we have lighter rear-wheel drive competitors now in the Ford Explorer and, of course, the Mazda CX-90. But even versus something like a Honda Pilot with its optional torque vectoring rear axle, you can have a decent amount of fun in that model, even though it has more weight on the front axle than the Durango. It's going to be significantly lighter, so all of that is going to factor in. That said, the excellent 8-speed automatic transmission and fairly aggressive gearing make the most of the 3.6-liter V6. And that's why even though our 0 to 60 of 7.6 seconds is slightly on the longer side of the V6 competition, it's actually still in the same range as most of the competitors, like the Kia Telluride, the Hyundai Palisade, the Nissan, etc. Keep in mind that the Highlander has now gone 4-cylinder only, and even in the Grand Highlander, you can't get a V6. But the turbocharged options are going to be right around this same 0 to 60 time as well, and a lot of them have more of a low-end torque advantage than the 3.6 that we find in the Durango. You're probably going to notice more of a difference when it comes to handling and stopping scores in the Durango. 6 to 0 stopping distance was fairly long at 128 feet for this segment. You'll certainly find shorter stopping options, even though the Durango has relatively wide tires on it. When it comes to handling, it's a bit of a mixed bag. You will go around corners a little bit quicker and a little bit tighter in some of the competition, but the Durango has a really great feel to it. The tires that are on the base versions are not terribly grippy. If you want a Durango that feels overtly sporty, you have to step all the way up to the 6.4-liter V8 or the supercharged 6.2, and those are considerably more expensive than any of the three-row competition. On the other hand, because the Durango was designed for more powerful V8 engines and wider tires, you could put wider and stickier tires on the V6 model and have one of the better handling options in this group. On the other hand, most versions of the Durango are going to have fairly soft suspensions, and the rear suspension, especially because of the payload rating and the general design of this for towing, etc., can tend to feel a little bit heavy sometimes out on winding roads. You really have to start pushing the Durango harder than you might think to really get those rear-wheel drive characteristics to start stepping in. And that's where something like an Explorer or a CX-90 are certainly going to feel more engaging than this. Handling is solid in the Durango, and it has a very Germanic feel to it, which shouldn't really surprise anybody, since the development of this dates all the way back to the Mercedes and Chrysler marriage era. This was coordinated as far as its development with the Mercedes ML and the Grand Cherokee of the era. So it certainly has that sort of German-heavy feel to it, but it's still going to be big and it's still going to be heavy. Fuel economy is of course going to be a little bit lower if you choose the 5.7-liter V8, but the difference is not enormous, and pretty much all of the competition is going to be more fuel efficient than the Durango. Some significantly more fuel efficient because of course you can get the hybrids in the Grand Highlander and in the Highlander. The counterpoint to that, of course, is the towing capability of the Durango, and it's not just about the tow weights, which are already higher than most of the competition. The Durango starts at about 6,200 pounds for the 3.6-liter V6. If you get the 5.7-liter V8, you can tow over 7,000 pounds, and it's over 8,000 pounds if you choose the optional towing package on the 5.7, or you choose the 6.4 or the 6.2-liter V8. But those three engines on the top end of things are significantly more expensive than any of the other competitors we've been talking about here. However, even with the 3.6-liter V6, it's going to feel better with a trailer connected to the back, and part of that does have to do with the curb weight. With the nearly 5,000-pound curb weight here, it's not going to get pushed around by a 4,000 or 5,000 trailer as much as an SUV that weighed considerably less than this. Also, we do have the bigger contact patch from those tires, etc. The things that hamper the fuel economy and hamper some of the other characteristics actually become a bit of an advantage when it comes to actual towing capability. Certainly, the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission is an excellent companion here. The shifts are quick, the shifts are crisp, and it definitely has that higher payload and higher towing capability about it. Now, don't get me wrong, the Durango is still fun to drive, and if you're interested in rear-wheel drive driving dynamics, this is one of the few places you can go. The Mazda CX-90 has a rear power-biased all-wheel drive system standard, but the all-wheel drive part is standard. So if you want an actual rear-wheel drive three-row vehicle here, basically this and the Ford Explorer are your only options in this mainstream segment. Likely because of the towing capability and the towing feel in the Durango, sales have been awfully stable over the last few years, even though this is not the most modern entry in the segment. And another area where you will really notice that is in the active safety systems that we find in the Durango. Yes, it has autonomous emergency braking and adaptive cruise control, but those systems are not quite as smooth as they are in really any of the competition. The lane centering system tends to ping-pong you back and forth in the lane more than actually keep you in the center of the lane, and it doesn't have some of the extra junction assist systems that we find in a lot of the competition. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section, and are you willing to trade some of these more modern features and functions, some of the extra handling capability you'll find in the competition, for the towing feel and the towing capability that we find in the Durango. The Durango isn't exactly a one-trick pony, but it doesn't have too many more tricks than maybe one or two, and it's not as well-rounded as really most of the competition at all. Be sure and sound off. Let me know what you think about the Durango, and how would you compare this to, say, a Hyundai Santa Fe or a Honda Passport, something along those lines. Keep in mind, this theoretically starts at around $39,000, but right now, Dodge is giving $3,000 off, at least in my zip code. So that really puts this actually lower than, for instance, the recently refreshed Honda Ridgeline and the recently refreshed Honda Passport, both of which are closely related, but just about as old feeling, I would say, as the Durango. But they don't have the same kind of driving nature as this. This is a fun rear-wheel drive vehicle. The V6 is pretty responsive, as is the 8-speed automatic transmission. The V8, obviously a lot more fun. And if you really wanted to do a lot of towing, that would be my preference, but the tow rating on this V6 is 1,000 pounds higher than average for this segment. You can tow over 6,000 pounds easily here. If you did plan on towing and you don't necessarily need the third row and you can live without some of the creature comforts, I have to say a base Durango seems like a strangely good deal, and one that I hadn't considered until I ended up renting this one for $30 a day out here in Hawaii. So let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And should more manufacturers be doing third row delete options? You do find this, for instance, in Ford's full-size SUV. They have a third row option, essentially, because you can get the base trim in a 5-passenger format. But outside that, things like the Telluride, the Palisade, the Highlander, Pilot, etc., none of those offer a factory option without the third row, and that's something that I really think they should consider. See all of you next week.